General Studies Paper 2, Polity. Polity in General Studies Paper 2, we have a unit, constitutional bodies, statutory bodies, regulatory bodies, and quasi-judicial bodies. So we take one unit on constitutional bodies, that is the Controller and Auditor General. So before we have a discussion on the CAG, just 2 minutes on what are constitutional bodies. Constitutional bodies are those which are set up by the Constitution. The terms and conditions are given in the Constitution, and these cannot be altered except through a procedure of amendment. So prominent constitutional bodies: the President, Prime Minister, Council of Ministers, the House of Parliament, Judiciary, and this CAG. I've just mentioned a few of the constitutional bodies. So the question for discussion: the exercise of the CAG's powers is related to Article 149. Discuss whether audit of government policies implementation could amount to overstepping of its jurisdiction. So in this, see, you may have read a lot about this CAG, the appointment by the President, the terms and conditions, method of removal, then relationship to the Public Accounts Committee. See, all this, you may have read all that, but that is not relevant to the question which is asked. The question is very straightforward. The exercise of CAG's power is related to Article 149. So Article 149 relates to the powers and functions of the Controller and Auditor General. So powers, that is in relation to the accounts of the Union, accounts of the states. As I said, how the CAG can audit the accounts of the funds received from the Consolidated Fund of India, Consolidated Fund of the state. This is just a brief introduction. Now we come to the main part of the question. First, an introduction. Now, how is accountability of government and public authorities to Parliament? As I said, government, that is the executive, is accountable to Parliament for whatever actions it takes. The executive, I mean the Prime Minister and Council of Ministers, are answerable to the Parliament through the CAG. You see the oath taken by the CAG. Now, every constitutional authority is supposed to take an oath. You take the ministers of the Union, they take an oath to protect the Constitution. You study the oath taken by the Chief Justice of India, judges, and the CAG. This is similar. So now the CAG takes an oath which is almost on the lines of the Chief Justice of India to uphold the Constitution and the laws, whereas other functionaries take an oath to uphold the Constitution. Here the CAG is taking the oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws. The link in government financial management is there are 4 steps: planning, budgeting, accounting, and audit. The audit is the last. It is a vital link which can trigger reforms. So much for the introduction to the question. Now, the main question which we will analyze: what is accountability? By accountability, I mean exercising prudence. So every bureaucrat is taught the canons of financial propriety, that is, spend government money just like how you spend your own private money. Exercising prudence, see whether the expenditure is required, avoiding unnecessary expenditure. The next thing, avoiding waste. See, especially the public authorities, the government departments, they have a tendency for going in for too much of purchases. All this can be streamlined. Avoid wasteful expenditure. Like I give an example in Karnataka, I do not know the procedure in other states. We have the practice of celebrating Ayuth Puja. So here there is a race between departments to see which vehicle is allotted more expenditure. All this is wasteful expenditure. It is not required. Government need not spend its money on wasteful expenditure. Then not incurring infructuous expenditure. Again, infructuous expenditure is wasteful expenditure. See, for instance, I remember in one of the Zilla Parishads, the president of the Zilla Parishad wanted the funds under MGNREGA for which is used for maintenance to be used for buying a new car for the office. So this is not allowed. So this is infructuous expenditure. Showing results for money spent. So you are accountable for every pie which is spent. The account should be properly maintained, and you should be able to show the results for the money spent. Then achieving results at the low cost. So economy and efficiency in expenditure. So this is how accountability is exercised. The CAG is an element of accountability. That is, executive is responsible to Parliament through the CAG. There are certain issues of concern. So the first thing would be, you take the public sector banks. They are out of purview of the CAG. Public sector banks are one of the agencies which you have seen now with an increase in the non-performing assets and a lot of scandals emerging out of the PSBs. Strangely, PSBs are kept out of the purview of the Controller and Auditor General. Now the moot question is whether the CAG can question policy acting as an instrument of accountability. We said CAG is the instrument of accountability. Can it question policy? See, there are 4 hypothetical situations where financial implications are not examined. Now, you have taken a project, say widening of a national highway or widening of the state highway, whatever. You have not analyzed the financial implication. So you are straight away going to implement the policy without examining the financial implications. So this is one issue where the CAG can question the decision of the government. The second one, okay, you have prepared financial implications for a project, but these implications are wrong in the sense that you have underestimated the financial implications, or you are trying to hoodwink the public. So you have wrongly prepared financial implications. So basic premise of preparing the proposal itself is wrong. The third one, the reason behind the decisions was fallacious. Now, you have taken a decision to implement a policy, some program. Now, you know very well that program cannot be implemented, so it is a fallacious decision. So whether you can incur expenditure on such a fallacious project. Then, the financial implications being higher than the assessment. The assessment of a project, but when the project is being implemented, the financial implications higher than the initial outlays. So these are the 4 hypothetical situations where you have to examine whether the CAG, by questioning the government, is it overstepping its jurisdiction. The question says whether audit of government policies implementation can amount to overstepping of its jurisdiction. I say it will not amount to overstep of its jurisdiction because CAG is an instrument of financial accountability. See here what major problem in the working of the CAG is, the work of the CAG is post-mortem. You take the practice in UK. See there the CAG can disallow certain expenditure. Here it is not like this. Because here what happens is the CAG comes in, audit comes only in the end. So though audit can trigger reform, audit can suggest reforms. You see how many recommendations of the CAG are implemented. Most of them are in cold storage, and most of them demand a lot of political decision to implement. So for a question like this, you will have to analyze and say that correct, the CAG cannot question day-to-day policy, it cannot go into the background of a government decision, Because ultimately, see, the government, that is the executive and the council of ministers, are responsible to the legislature. They are responsible to the people. They answer the people once in 5 years at the time of election. The CAG is not accountable to the people. CAG is only an instrument of accountability. And as I told you, the CAG helps the Public Accounts Committee. That is a separate thing. Now, what I'm trying to emphasize is, it is not that the CAG cannot question policy. We have raised 4 hypothetical situations wherein there is nothing wrong if the CAG questions policy, because as I told you, the basic premises are wrong, or the government is going on the wrong direction. Like I told you, financial implications are not examined. Straight away you're going ahead with the project, not knowing the outcomes, and your decisions are fallacious, and you're making wrong financial implications, and financial implications being higher than the outlay. So all this, of course, all this will be pointed out in audit, and of course we have the CAG plays a dominant role in fixing personal responsibility. See, like what happens in the audit report of the CAG. The CAG can recommend that the money should be recovered from the concerned government official. Suppose the government official is retired, it can be recovered from his pension. Apart from, it can also recommend disciplinary action if the official has acted beyond his jurisdiction, or if it is proved that the official has misused his authority in indulging in favoritism, whatever. So, for a question like this, the answer has to be very analytical. It is not that you're going to write whatever you know about the CAG in the answer. See, the examiner is aware of the appointment of the CAG, his role, functions, everything. But the question is very straightforward. The question is whether whether the audit of government policies and implementation is tantamount to overstepping of its jurisdiction. Here I take the stand that the hypothetical situations where I've examined, it will not amount to questioning the overlapping of his jurisdiction, because the CAG is only examining is pointing out the principles of accountability, like we analyzed in the first part of the answer: exercising prudence, avoiding waste, not incurring infructuous expenditure, showing results for money spent, achieving results at low cost. See, these are the 5 elements of accountability which are being enforced through the CAG. So there is no question of the CAG overstepping its authority. It is only acting as an instrument of financial accountability and highlighting what has gone wrong and what steps could be taken to prevent recurrence of such issues.